We want to hear your questions, or if there's anything you want to share with folks while you're here. This is what this space is about. Does that sound good? All right, cool. Yeah, yes. So my name's Melinda Fox, and I am a social entrepreneur. I live in Seattle, and I am building the first mobile app to galvanize audiences around women-centric film, TV, and online content. So for those of you like me with an attention span of a goldfish, think of it as a feminist Fandango. So it'll be a ticketing app. It'll get audiences out when it counts most on opening weekends, turn you on to what's playing in theaters near you, as well as helping populate from some of your favorite streaming queues. So it's called Tanji, T-A-N-J-I, and if you'll give us a follow on Tanji Mobi, M-O-B-I, that would be great. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of these filmmakers, and it really means the world to me to be here with you today as well, because I am building my tool as a fan. And my co-founders are in the industry, but I know the power of a fan, and I know how we don't want our worlds ruined, and we want them to be fed, and we want to see people that look like us on screens, and folks that we can share experiences with. So I am going to ask our panelists to give a quick intro about what put them on the map in making some queer legends, and then I'll dive in with questions, okay?
I'm Becca Roth. I'm an independent filmmaker living in New York City, and I guess my biggest project, why they asked me to come here, I directed a documentary called One, A Story of Love and Equality, which was about humanizing the marriage equality debate in North Carolina during the vote on the amendment. It was actually the last voter-based amendment that banned gay marriage, which I did not know at the time, obviously, so that was pretty cool. I am currently directing a digital documentary series for the Oscar-winning company Shamim Global, which I'm super excited about to be able to say. And my wife and I just came up with a really cool idea for a documentary over lunch yesterday, so look out for that.
Shout out to the wives.
I'm Shamim Sarif. I'm a novelist, screenwriter and director, and I've made with Hanan I Can't Think Straight. And The World Unseen. Despite the Falling Snow. So our next movie, Despite the Falling Snow, is about Ferguson, is out end of March, actually, in theatres in 10 cities. And we're working on an all-female action movie next with a lead gay protagonist.
We're definitely going to talk about that.
I'm Hanan Kattan, married to Shamim, and the reason I produce is to make sure that she gets her creative vision on the screen without being decayed by many people who ask us to DK our films.
I made a movie a while ago called Saving Face. Then I spent a number of years just writing scripts for years. I have a coming-of-age queer teen movie that I'm writing now that hopes to direct that. So hopefully, cross my fingers, that will be something that I hope put out there.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that journey as well, because I think that's really interesting and important for fans to understand how they can actually play a part towards film equality, towards representation on screens. So what I want to kick us off with is about this idea of iconic characters. What makes your characters specifically, since you are also the writers of your films, what makes your characters, Will and Vivian and Tala and Layla, so iconic to you as writers and directors, and where did that kind of that inspiration come from?
Well, for us, I Can't Think Straight is a very personal story. It's loosely based on Hanan and myself, with obvious changes because it all happened in an hour and a half. But it was a difficult time for us to come out 21 years ago.
Can you tell us where you came out? Where you were living?
We were living in London, both of us, but I'm of Muslim Indian background. I was expected to marry a Muslim doctor or lawyer or something like that. And Hanan is Christian Palestinian. and had been engaged 5 times in an attempt to try to meet her family's expectations. So unsuccessfully.
Thwarted.
Yes. So that really formed the basis of I Can't Think Straight. And I think what was for us at the time a very traumatic time in our lives, being rejected by our families, being made to feel that we were doing something very, very wrong, and it was going to affect them very badly, and make that into something that was actually joyful and celebratory, and to say that actually there can be a happy ending here. So really that's where it came from, and my takeaway from that, which I didn't expect, that the affection that I Can't Think Straight inspired. I think it's because at that time particularly there were few lesbian films with happy endings, and I'm mostly for Satan basically, quite to be on that. And I think people sometimes just need to see, you talked about iconic, they just need to see a role model that shows them that it's okay to feel the way they're feeling, and that things could work out. So I think it was simple in that sense, the initial excitement about it.
That's great. Alice, what about you? We have a wedding theme here as well with the film, so can you talk a little bit about well, just the ceremonies and what and family pressure and you know, kind of the cultural restraints around this.
Yeah, I mean, I love what Shamim said about, because I agree. Like, I think first of all, when I was writing this movie, I never thought this movie would get made. I was a computer scientist at the time, and I was really just writing something, which I think a lot of art is. It's a lot of the specific writer trying to work something out in their own lives, and I was effectively writing a love letter to my mom. Like, I knew how hard it was for her to deal with the fact that I was gay, and I was trying to write a story that basically about these 2 women who both have to, on some level, push against and go for things that are hard for them to do in order to sort of launch this journey where they both each end up coming into their own. And so in a way, it's sort of a role reversal where the mother ends up sort of messing up spectacularly, and the daughter has to figure out how to fix this. And in that process, when the movie actually was getting made, I think it caught me really off guard that this was going to happen. And I realized on some level, like when you talk about making these iconic characters, I think maybe because I didn't have the pressure of thinking, what would Hollywood like, or what would, I wasn't really thinking about what the audience would like. I was actually thinking more about what characters mean something to me. Like I tend to write everything from a somewhat comedic bent, but the humor I love tends to be very grounded in real people, and it tends to be real people trying their best to do what they think is right. And more often than not, what we think is right is actually wrong, which is why relationships are so difficult. And that's where hopefully the humor rises from. And I think so with Will and Vivian, I think I was just taking pieces of both myself, but also other people I knew, and really sort of exploring that. And towards your point about happy endings, I did remember when I was writing this, even knowing, and I did, like the first few festivals we went to, sometimes people were like, I really love the movie, but I just don't know if I totally buy it would be that happy. Like, that just seems kind of like a fantasy. And I remember sort of thinking about it and saying, well, I know I am going for growth at that moment. But I think that especially when you have a piece of, like whether it's a film or a novel, on some level you're trying to push people to feel something. You're trying to push them to maybe see the world in a larger way. And I think it's important to try, like I really wanted to write a character that has to sort of go against like everything. Like she has such a hard time asking for what she wants, and I wanted to show a character that has to push against that, to reach out and go after the love of her life. And that happens so publicly, and she ends up getting, as a result of doing that, she ends up getting the love. I think it was an important thing for people to see, especially for queer women, especially for Asian women, and on some level for everyone. And what is kind of great is that I would say that, like back then, people might ask questions, and now nobody says, oh, it seems too happy at the end, which to me says the world has actually moved to a place where we accept that. That's awesome.
And Becca, you did a doc, so can you talk a little bit about the character? I mean, they're not technically characters, but the people and how you chose to intersect the stories of the opposites and kind of why telling this story in that way makes it iconic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what Alice said really struck me of like this personal drive to tell a certain story. Like this story that I told was not necessarily about me. me, but it was from this like fire that I had within myself based on real life interactions with like at like rallies with like the other side, like telling me all these things about myself that like weren't true, that they like didn't know about me, and I got so frustrated with that. And so as a way to work stuff out myself as well, I was like, I want to make a film that like both like shows who I am as a person, not necessarily through myself, but through other people who are like me, and try to understand where people on the other side are coming from. And that was like a really personal thing for me, and I think that is what drove me to like make this with like no budget for like 2 years, because it was such a passion project. I think also just like in terms of like telling really like genuine, iconic stories, I think like coming from a really personal place in general is really important. Like I think just like saying blanket, like we need more like diversity, or like we need more like lesbian characters like that, or like we need more like groundbreaking work. Like that's hard to just like sit down and be like, I'm gonna write a groundbreaking screenplay. Like that's harder than like just like having a personal story to tell. And I think that's where like the authentic stories come from.
Yeah, and I think with your doc, the timing, which if you could draw that out a little bit more for not everyone who's completely familiar with that point in history and why it was so revolutionary.
Well, the time that I made the film, actually, it was really interesting for me because it was, I shot it in 2012 and it came out in 2014. And that was like a turning point for sure, because like the majority of states had voter-based marriage bans. And that was like what the lay of the land was. And so, so this amendment it was called Amendment 1, and the people of North Carolina voted for it like unanimously, and it was really, really devastating. But it was so cool that right after that, like that never happened again, ever. Hopefully, never again. So yeah.
And now it's a lock. Well, we think it's a lock, so that's good. And these themes are so interesting. I think as fans, you were saying in your creative process, you're drawing out your personal story and the experience of knowing other people. But as fans, when we're watching these films, we're actually seeing it in the same way, which I think is really kind of interesting and trippy. I mean, we're relating it to it in much the same ways that you are coming from. So I think that's really meaningful for all of us. I do want to talk a little bit about these cultural restraints, because I think it's worth drawing them out a little bit more, because for as far as we come, we're backsliding in some ways, and those are some of the things I think in all films that I really enjoy is when I see these folks pushing through those, and to me it's super, super bold as well. So I'd love to just draw that out a little bit more, and also to your point about happy endings. I'm like many of us here. I don't know if you're watching Brown Girls doc web series. Anybody watching that? No? Oh my God, it's free online. Open TV, Brown Girls web series. Anyways, it's written by 2 queer women, one black, one Muslim, and one of the things that they are trying to emphasize is that, women of color and their bodies not being vessels of pain in every single other narrative, and I think that's really important. So can you maybe talk a little bit about both those things in any way that it resonates with you?
For me, I think it's when you said that you watch the movies and you feel the same thing that we want to communicate.
Well, we're connecting on the same things.
Connecting on the same things, yeah. And I think it's because it is universal. I think it's certainly that I can't think straight in the world unseen. It's rare to see women of color falling in love and then having a happy ending without being vessels of pain. But for me, the reason it was important to have those hopeful endings in both of those films was that, at the end of the day, what makes it universal for us is that as human beings, we're only here, in my opinion, for one reason, which is to expand and to grow as people. As if you're not doing that, you're kind of going to slow decline towards, whatever. You've got to keep that. That's what makes us excited about life. It's what makes us inspired about life. And as gay women, I think a lot of the time we come up against having to make those decisions early to push against the expectations that are around us. Hopefully less and less, but certainly for me and Hanan, we had to make big decisions expectations that were around us, which are not important expectations, they're just societal expectations or religious expectations. So I think that when people see stories like that, it is inspiring because it connects you to what actually we know to be true. What is the most important thing is to be emotionally evolved, emotionally fulfilled, and nothing else can beat that. And that's what makes those stories so wonderful to watch, I think. So I think that's going to the iconic nature of it is something to do with what makes them so needed, I think, in our community as well. But I can't remember.
Definitely can't have enough.
Sorry.
What about you, Alice?
I'm totally going to admit that when you said that thing about no one watching Brown Girls web series, part of my brain actually went into a shame place. I totally missed the rest of your question. And so I loved her answer. So I'm trying to figure out, I think what you asked is...
I didn't mean to shame you all, but shame on us. No, it's just so wonderful, and it's just so watchable. And I think part of what makes me excited about it is just, it's just. For me, web series are such an amazing entry point for filmmakers nowadays because, they're doing it with very little funding and they're doing it with their friends, and there's something very organic about it that I really appreciate. So, to pull you back in, on the cultural restraint side of things, like showing gay Asian love on screen is not very typical, right?
And you're asking...
And I'm asking, and so can you just draw out a little bit more about what that was like? I get the point that you were really working through some stuff with your mom, but on a broader sense too, like, you're through friends, family, and other people that you were telling you were working on this film and kind of what this story was about and whatnot. Like, that's very boundary pushing in a lot of ways. So can you maybe just expand a little bit on that?
Okay. Yeah. No. It's a great question. I think. One thing that comes to mind as you were talking is that, this movie, if you've seen it, it's a very specific movie in that it's like half a Mandarin Chinese. We went, there's like 27 roles, all of whom speak different dialects of like Chinese. There's literally only one white person in the movie. She says one line, and then I'm sorry, there are two white people in the movie who have very few lines and end up leaving. But it's a very American movie, I think, because I think that a lot of the American experience, for most of us, is an immigrant experience. Like, even if you're white, most likely you don't have to go through that many generations back, right? And so I think there's a way, partly, and this touches on what Shamim said, I personally do think that the more specific you get with something, the more universal it becomes. And I think when you're writing, your richest stuff is going to be the stuff that you know the best, right? That's your best chance, I think, at creating a really well-rounded, interesting character. And so in that sense, I like the fact that, like, when that movie came out, people would come up to me at Sundance and they'd be like, a European-American 50-year-old straight white guy would be like, this is totally my family. Or like my favorite thing was this 14-year-old, for some reason CAA bussed in all these kids who were like high school kids to come to the movie. And I was like,
at Sundance?
Yeah, and it's an R-rated movie. But then I realized at Sundance, honestly, my movie was probably one of the easier ones to watch than some of the other movies that might have been there. But so there were these 14 and 15-year-old kids watching, and there's a whole Asian lesbian sex scene in my movie, so I'm just like, oh my god. But afterward, one of them came up to me and he was like, that's totally my Mexican family. That was, and it made me so happy that he felt that way. So and then the only other thing I can think of is that when we premiered, we opened the San Francisco Asian American Film Festival, and we played the Castro Theater, which is my absolute favorite theater in the world. It's huge. And that opening night, it was packed, it was sold out, and it was half gay people and half old Chinese people from Chinatown. You would get some old guy who didn't speak English at all, sitting next to a leather man, and it was I've never seen anything. It made me so happy. So yeah.
And did it get applause?
It did. It was sort of fascinating because I thought the gay community would probably like this, but I don't know about the Chinese community. They're very picky, but they were really shockingly embracing. I credit Joan Chen.
Well, for sure. Well, that's awesome. Before we turn it over to the fans, I want to draw out a little bit about the fact that, right now we're talking about, and I think Ava DuVernay said this, making a film is a radical act. Making a second film is even more radical. And there's a lot of conversation, obviously, in the mainstream as well as within the industry about the lack of representation, and particularly with women who are makers. You are all directors, producers, and writers, and the stats even this last year, went down. Just by a little bit, but still, it's not despite all this awareness and whatnot. The fact that the folks working behind the scenes, behind the cameras in particular, have gone, in a negative direction. What is it like, and what was it like, whether it's on your first film or your second film or the films that we're talking about today? What was that journey like? From concept to getting your film made, and then if you can talk a little bit about what happened after with the distribution and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about your journey before we turn it over to the fans?
Well, my job is to try to raise the funding, put the cast, the crew, and put the whole thing together. Shamim's creative vision. So it's always very difficult to get funding for lesbian-led female protagonists. It's really hard, especially with multicultural backgrounds. Whether Indian, Christian, Muslim, whatever it is. So it's always hard. Whenever we go for pitch meetings, they will say, well, we love it, but try to have, can you change it if you had a male character, or if Rebecca Ferguson, for example, in This Wet Falling Snow was called birth or something. So the same thing with the next film, and for distribution, they say, well, if you can de-gay her or change the lead from a gay lesbian character to sort of tone her down so we can sell China and India and Africa and the Middle East and so on. So regardless of how well the film is done for winning awards, kind of distribution, it's always the same obstacle. And as the budget goes up, obstacles increase. So it's a very, very tricky terrain. I don't think it's changed, actually. It's going on backwards.
It has. But yet you went into your second film, so you were able to do it again, right? Which is huge, because sometimes, there's a stat out there that it can take almost 10 years for a woman director to get to her next film, which is insane,
I think the difference here is we've done 3 films now and 1 documentary, which documentary in 10 years, so it's pretty impressive for independent films.
It's incredibly impressive.
Yeah. And I think it's because we're focused now on production company, we're just focused on producing Shamim's work. I don't try to take on other projects because it's hard enough doing that. I believe in the work, and I want to put all my energy and focus into it. So if one door closes, you try to find 10 others that open. You just have to keep trying and be persistent and focused. And when you believe in what you're doing, you find a way to do it.
Yeah. And have you circled a wagon of allies that you can go back to?
Not really. I mean, the first couple of films, definitely, we've always had female investors, supporters, and so on. But as the budgets increased, we had to go to a bigger and bigger pool. So the previous original supporters are there, but you have to expand the base, definitely.
What about you, Becca? Do you want to go next?
Yeah, well, I think my situation is a little unique because I've never gone through all of that. That, really intimidates me, but I decided I was a filmmaker out of college, and I think I just was, maybe super delusional about all that information, but I was just I'm just going to do it, and
That's how you do it.
Well, that's how I did it. I mean,
That's how the guys do it.
I just decided, I'd already made a short film before I made my doc, but I just, went on Kickstarter and, just asked for money, and, I made my film completely independently, and I distributed independently. And I think now, for aspiring filmmakers, it's a lot easier in certain ways. I think, I definitely, want to make, a higher profile,
bigger scale film, and I definitely think that's a lot harder in the ways that you talked about. But I think there's no reason to not do it. Definitely do it. You can. It's cheaper to do now. Equipment is a lot more accessible now, and you can raise money. And if you have that base of people who are interested in seeing what you're making, they'll support you. And
so building your audiences from the get-go. Yeah. What about you, Alice? What was it like getting your first film made?
Well, first I was going to say I'm so impressed that you guys have made more than one film and kept going, because that is so hard to do. And I really, I find, if any of you are filmmakers,
Especially 3 in 10 years.
yeah, that's amazing. So I just made and wrote and directed that one film, and then very quickly after that, sort of got sucked into writing scripts for studios and paying bills and sort of being on that treadmill. And there were exciting things about that, but ultimately it wasn't. Well, I just sold a pilot to ABC when my mom had massive heart failure, so I dropped everything and moved to San Francisco to take care of her. And in that process, realized that I actually wasn't happy doing what I had been doing. Like, I wasn't deeply unhappy as much as it wasn't, like, I never made Saving Face with the thought that I was going to become a filmmaker. I just really wanted to make that movie. And when it got made, I realized how much I love being on a shoot. I actually love directing. If any of you were in the panel before, you'll know, like, Michelle and Lynn and Joan and I, they're among my best friends. Like, it was such a great experience. And I'd love a chance to do that again. I might lack the requisite, like, I'm just not someone who's like, I must be a filmmaker at all costs, but I get very project focused. So what will happen with me is I will fall in love with a project and be like, I don't care if this takes 50 years, I'm just going to do it, like, until it gets made. It will be made exactly how I want to make it, you know, like the, and so towards that point, like, I was writing, I still recently, like, I wrote another script for DreamWorks last year, but then I just sort of turned down studio gigs, because I have another project. I have like 3 projects I'd love to make, but this is the next one up. It's a queer coming of age teen movie. I don't know if it'll get made. That's kind of above my pay grade. I only know I'm just going to try the best I can. So the only other thing, by the way, this is, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but actually a lovely new friend came up to me like half an hour ago to be like, you know, I Googled you and you were wearing the same sweater that you wore 10 years ago. So it's possible I just lived.
But also somebody else wore it like 50 years ago. So, you know, whatever. It's an iconic sweater, you know.
Hanan is always telling me that, by the way, because I always wear the same stuff. She's like, you look like you did 3 years ago.
That's all right. I think we're all comfortable with that. So, hey, do we want to turn over some questions to the audience? Do you want to? Yeah? All right, great. We're going to share a mic.
I'm going to give you this one. Does anyone, let's line up right over here if you can. All right, yeah, you can stand there.
This is actually a question about, I can't speak straight, sorry, obviously I can. I'm German, and I've rewatched the movie a few times, like very few times, and I watched it like years ago, obviously, and then I rewatched it last year, and I'm German, and I was surprised because the movie changed. It's suddenly become like super political. It's become like impactful and has gained like just by the changing political landscape, especially in my country. I don't know if anybody else has had the same experience. It has completely changed. I mean, the movie obviously has stayed the same in my shelf, but I just I'm just wondering if you've had the same experience, that people have been coming up to you, if it's been a different experience depending on where you've screened it, and yeah, that's basically.
Who wants to take it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you have a Middle Eastern character, a Palestinian character, you can't avoid politics. It's when Shamim and I have been together 21 years, and she used to be, I think, horrified at some of the conversations that took place at my family's dinner tables and so on. So, it's nothing to do with it.
Also universal.
So I think lots of people who have seen like Ethnic Straight as a lesbian film and so on have probably missed the nuances and the multi-layers, but they're always there. And I think rightly so now with the whole political refugees and the East and all the wars we've had in the East and so on. So if you see it in a different perspective, they've always been there, that they stand out more than they have originally. But they were always there as part of the story and the intention. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's one of the great things when you see it, when you find a movie or book that you enjoy, it's because you bring yourself to it. So it's never the same experience after a few years' time. But that's great to hear. I was worried that you were going to say, I saw it and I loved it, and then I saw it again and I thought, so that was a relief. No, but I'm glad glad you got that, because it was very important to me to put that in there, because I think I had a unique window into the Palestinian world, and of course into my own family's world, and I was kind of appalled by the stuff that just flew around the dinner table, stuff that's very politically incorrect or whatever, but I wanted to put it in there, because I thought you don't often see Palestinian families portrayed on film, and especially and when you do, it tends to be refugee camps or whatever, so it was another world, and I thought, why not have that sort of culturally specific window, because and now unfortunately more and more timely, post-Trump America. Anyway, it's not time to start drinking yet.
So suffering us down. Great.
Every morning I wake up and I think it wasn't really true.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that.
Hi, thank you for all the movies that you guys make, because my family is ridiculously diverse. I have Lebanese, Mexican, Brazilian, and Chinese American members of my family, and seeing them on film in different versions of them is amazing, because I grew up with tabbouleh, tamale, and turkey at the same Thanksgiving table, literally. My question was, do you have future projects to bring more stories about different cultures, different characters, different people from different backgrounds? I know that Alice does, because I went to her previous panel, but does anybody else have anything in the works that they're excited about?
Well, the series that I'm working on right now, it's not, I think with everything that I do, I try to be obviously as inclusive as possible. I don't have anything specifically, but yeah, the series that I'm doing is about the impact on mentorship, on mentors, on children, and I'm trying to have as wide array of representation as possible in that, and I'm really excited about that. I'm currently casting, actually, so if you guys have any, if you're mentors or if you know any in the New York area, honestly, let me know. But yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Well, our next movie is hopefully called The Artemis Protocol, and it's based on my fourth novel, which I've just finished. And that's, I suppose, quite diverse. It's just something that's natural to me. I think we've both grown up in London, which is very international, in very diverse families. So, and that has 6 women in it, 3 women who run a rogue agency, and they are American, Chinese, and British. Yes, I forgot. Sorry. What was the other one? So many people in my head. And then they run a team of younger female agents. So one of those is British as well, because she's the daughter of the British music star. And then one is Arab, and one is American. But for example, when we get into this wonderful casting process where it's like, oh great, it's an all-female movie, and it's so great, it's so timely, and here are the 3 actresses that you can have to play that role. And you're like, really? Because they are castable, and far fewer women on that list. So for financeable, not castable, sorry, you're right.
Big distinction.
Yeah, it is, yeah. But for me, for example, with the Americans, we've gone to an African American actress now for a role that everybody read as being, typical East Coast, blonde, blonde, whatever. For me, it actually doesn't matter one way or the other. I think it would be great to have more diversity wherever we can. So it's just pursuing those opportunities, because it means it feels right for the project, and it feels right for who we are, I think, as filmmakers as well. And that's the world we live in. I mean, that's your Thanksgiving table, and that's, I think, a lot of the people in this room and in every room in America, despite what the president wants to say. It's the first time I've called him the president. I'm going to take that back.
You can take that.
So I think it's very important to have that, and I think it's time that Hollywood embraced that a little bit more, and without it just being the sidekick or the best friend or whatever. And I think there's a way to go in the studio movies, but it's getting interesting.
It's interesting, as you asked that question, I sort of an anecdote is, so I'm working on this queer coming of age teen movie. I started writing it, and about halfway through writing it, I got this call to do the studio gig, and I ended up taking it. And what's interesting is that prior to that, I'd had 3 years of horrible writer's block, and I wasn't working at all. And when I started writing this script, I made all the characters white. I was like, okay, you know what? I don't remember why, but there was a reason that made sense for the story, I thought at the time. So I was like set it in a small town in Washington State. I was like, okay, it's gonna be. And then I stopped in the middle, did the studio gig, and I came back and I suddenly like, that's not the story I want to tell. Like, I didn't grow up in a small Washington State town. Like, the actual kernel that's important to me, that story, doesn't have to be set there. Like, you know, it's really about friendship. And I'm like, so I actually changed it. And now I completely said, all right, I'm going to go back. The main character is Asian American. Her best friend is Mexican Jewish. This is like, I'm going to actually have her reflect what my upbringing was. And so in that sense, it's, and part of it is because, like, well, I just wrote this whole script where every character's a duck. So if somebody wants to be like, can you write for white people? It's like, well, like, here's a totally non-race-based, yeah.
And it was not interesting to you after all. I really hope that gets made because one of my good friends, who's also my Taekwondo instructor, is Mexican, Jewish, and hard of hearing. So she gets the other thing that isn't shown in movies. So that she'll love that. Question.
I've been watching lesbian film since the late 1980s. I've been to a lot of film festivals that had LGBTQ, and what I've seen time and time again is the miserable endings to the majority of these films. I've written a lot of Amazon reviews on Please Don't Go, that take a value, that don't see this film. And what I loved about I Can't Think Straight and also your film Saving Face is there was a happy ending, and that is a radical notion even today, which is why we have ClexaCon, is because the way they keep portraying the miserable, unhappy endings of lesbian, bisexual people just have a miserable ending. And I, time and time again to this day, I see your film at least once a year on my DVD as a pick-me-up, and go, well, there's some women that actually have a happy ending. And I just want to thank you for that because, again, it's still a radical notion. And then you had said for Saving Face, a happy ending. I don't know if that's really important. It is very important. And lots of us are continually devastated. I mean, ClexaCon, we were devastated. I mean, we keep reading what's like 20 women were killed or something happened to them in 2015 or 2016. It's depressing as hell, And you guys have the power to make something positive, and I applaud you for that. Thank you very much.
Don't be shy. Are you nervous?
No.
It's okay, I swear.
You wouldn't know nervous if my tea is over there, and there's no way I'm such a klutz that I was going to do tea from down here. I was going to go for it, and then I could see Hanan go.
I'm not supposed to do this, but I Can't Think Straight and Saving Face kind of really helped me, saved me a lot. After coming out of service and serving, there wasn't really much hope in my eyes and things for me to look at and see. And when I saw I Can't Think Straight, I was like, that's part of my culture, that's my family. And I saw myself, oh God, one day I could get past all of this, and it is going to be hard, it's going to be tough. And seeing that film, it really just gave me this strong hope. And then seeing Saving Face, it just like seeing that every culture, has their way of what things supposed to be. And if what you feel, you have to go after it. No matter what, it's going to be hard, but you can have a happy ending.
and no matter what you go through, you could just have a happy ending, even though it doesn't seem that way after your films. Just every other film is the same opposite of that, and your life. I just really wanted to thank you guys for making those films, taking the courage, being brave enough to show your own personal cultures and what it takes to just love yourself and love the fact and accept the fact I am a lesbian, and I don't have to go in that direction just because my family wants me to, kind of concept. And I want to, and the question I would ask is, would you at some point, I know that I will strive to, but I would like to know if at some point you would include in another film or some more films military background, women that are in service and they are lesbian, but there's still that concept of closed off, don't ask, don't tell, but then if you tell, now it's open, it's still that conflict of interest, but then we are serving, we are coming back, and we are looking for films like this to give us hope, to give us we can still be good and happy. And I don't know what to say, just thank you, and hoping that you continue making films and at least include now one's service members. I would love to see more of that, if anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say, we're not lesbian, we're just trying to piss off our parents.
First, I just want to thank you for your service, by the way. My whole family's military, so thanks to her. Hi y'all, thank you for being here. Hi everybody. My name is Amanda Moon. Yesterday, if you were at the shoot panel, I'm part of High Tide Entertainment. We're pretty much a startup company, so I wanted to address you guys asking about, we're trying to start a documentary about the transgender community. And since we are a startup, we don't really have that much credibility. How did you approach people for funding, or how did you get investors, or what was that process? Could you tell me what that was like?
Yeah, again, I think my process is really different, but I think for me, I started with my base, with people I knew, and then people who were part of organizations that I personally knew, and then they reached out exponentially, and then I reached out to organizations. But yeah, mine was pretty social media crowdfunding based. So as far as investors, you guys probably know more than that.
Ours was slightly different in that Shamim was already an award-winning novelist, and her novel won 2 very prestigious awards in the UK, and had a following, a fan base. And some of our friends and female investors who jumped in were very big fans of the work and the story. And the first story was the well seen that we actually, well seen got shot afterwards, but Camping Street was shot first, and then we lost it with a whole bunch of investor. So it was easier to raise the funds because people believed in the work, loved the novel and the work, and wanted to see strong female protagonists. It wasn't very easy because the budgets were slightly bigger, but it took the perseverance and sort of going to people you know and having them have faith in the project and wanting to see the stories on the screen. So we were lucky in that perspective. And it's just expanding the circle, as I mentioned.
I'm terrible at asking for money. I'm definitely a filmmaker that needs a producer. I'm Chinese. We can't even not fight over the check. Going to someone. So I've had actually friends who were like, "Oh, you're making a film. I'd love to, invest or donate." And I'm like, "Don't do it. It's a terrible investment." And they were like, "But it's okay. It'll be like a donation." And I was like, "I don't want to ruin our friendship. I will feel embarrassed." And so I was very much I was very fortunate to. I won a screenplay award contest, and one of the judges there ended up becoming my producer. And then they found the financing. And so I guess I think that again was many years ago, and I think there are many different. And I think Becca talking about crowdsourcing, it's a whole different world now. And so I bet you're savvier at it than I am.
Trying to be.
And, you know, I'm doing a startup that obviously is being built on content that's being made that we all want to see. And my co-founders are actually film producers, Tangerine Entertainment. So what I can say is start with who you know and use all the tools at your disposal. So, for instance, Paul Feig is one of our first advisors, and he actually came to me via social media. Which is pretty, and it was him running his own social media, saying, I want to know what's happening with what you're doing, and, you know, let's meet sometime. And I said, great, I can come to you, and let me know when. And then it took off from there. Now, he's a special guy, obviously, but there was someone else. I went to things like this, and, you know, people, like, I did the same thing you did. I stood up and said, well, here's what I'm working on, and it was the first time I really said it out loud. And one of the panelists was Emily Best from Seed and Spark, and she's a woman co-founder, and she created the first crowdfunding platform specifically for independent filmmakers. So not only are you building your audiences and you're raising money, but you can also ask to borrow like certain pieces of equipment that, you know, a lot of independent filmmakers can't afford, you know, on their first films, or, you know, and so you're building community, you're building an audience, you're building trust with your first investors and aggregate it. You know, we're all willing to, I mean, we can all give Alice $20 today, can't we? No, I'm just kidding.
It's a terrible investment.
Yeah. I'll give it to you, and then you can give it back to me after this. And then Emily Beth said, hey, you know what? I know these amazing women in film who want to do something in the digital space. You're building this as a fan, and you know the tech side of it. I think you guys would, you know, together you could really, you know, gel, and you're all a bunch of broads that would get along. So, and we met, and we kind of like dated almost for a long weekend. And, you know,
asking 20 questions.
Yeah, we did all the things that, and I said, well, here's what's important. I want eye contact. I want to hear about how you guys work through conflict. I want to, like, drink a shot of tequila with you. I'm in Seattle. I would like to smoke you out. You know, like things like that. So, you know, we just kept it very real. And then at the end, we just focused and said, how do we all feel about this? You know, and it's been great. So I think, you know, you can't get anywhere without putting yourself out there. And it sounds like you're already doing it. You just got to do more of it, and somebody's going to turn up for you. I promise you, they will.
Thank you, ladies, so much. I would love to talk to you after, if that's okay. Everybody, we do have a page on Instagram, social media. It's called The Gay Agenda. That's where we've been focusing most of our stuff. So this is my platform for you guys until we're up there. We want to create the media that you're talking about earlier with the military. I would love to do that. We would love to do all that stuff. So please, guys, I need your help. I need your help so I can provide the content for you and help them, you know, get to that space. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, we're all part of the ecosystem, for sure.
Hey guys, I'm not good at public speaking, so excuse me if I mess it up.
It's okay.
But I'm originally from Israel, and my absolute favorite film is I Can't Think Straight. And I think all of my friends back home would be about the same. I guess my question is, you use both Lisa Ray and Chital in I Can't Think Straight and The Word Unseen. What was the thought process behind it? Was it just a production constraint? Or, I don't know, chemistry?
Now I'm thinking back and thinking, God, what did that Palestinian family say about the Israelis in that movie? It's awful.
Very politically.
But Salvatore is alive, I think, in some aspects. The reason, look, with Lisa, I saw her in Water, the Eva Menzies movie, and I just thought she was exceptional, and I said to her, you know, it'd be really interesting to talk to her about the role. Cut to having lunch with her later in London, and so Hanan just arranged that, and we just hit it off. She really loved the script, and I really felt that I wanted to work with her. We had explored working with Arab actresses for their role, and it was tough to find actors who would do the love scenes. And we had, so, you know, I didn't want to cast just for ethnicity. I wanted to cast for the right role, and I didn't have a big enough pool of people to choose from. We didn't go to the Middle East. We didn't have that luxury. We needed to cast very quickly and get going very quickly the way it came together. And with Sheetal, I think I mentioned this in the previous panel, sorry if I'm repeating, but she came onto the project towards the end of pre-production. So we did have a South Asian British actress attached, but she again also had issues with the love scene, and her parents did as well. So she felt she wanted to step away from the project for that reason. But in the end, yes, the chemistry was incredible, but we didn't know that it was going to be incredible because Hanan had told Sheep, well, come over, pack for a month, but be prepared to be home in a day. We're still my agent now, which is not particularly charming. But she, to her credit, she came out and there was, obviously very good chemistry between them. So really for me, it's, I think casting the character first and foremost. If you can have the correct ethnicity and the correct background, that's a bonus. But I think actors by their nature are chameleons. And, in the next film, the World Unseen, I use the same actors again, both playing Indian, which is their background, but in very reversed kind of roles. So
and they did the scenes.
They did the scenes. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's very important to make them feel comfortable and safe and secure that those scenes are there for the right reason. I never wanted to do things gratuitously, but I felt like this was important in this style of movie and this type of movie.
You want to speak to that? Oh, sorry, I thought this totally connected directly to
Well,
the
but can you also talk a little bit about like in your casting, because these are some pretty,
Yeah, I guess the question is sort of casting specific for ethnic type. I absolutely wanted the three main women leads all to be Chinese. But, actually the character of Vivian, I was open to possibly someone who was not, who was Asian American playing that, because Vivian doesn't speak any Mandarin in it. It just happened that it turned out they were all Mandarin. Where I got very specific is if you do speak Mandarin or you know any dialects, there's times when they actually speak Shanghainese, and it was very specific about wanting to make sure that those people spoke fluently and that it was accurate, because I knew that Chinese people are very, very, very picky about accents.
So I just want to jump in, Shalom, and nice to meet you. We actually, when we screened in Tel Aviv, we had a lot of drama politically from an Arab organization that threatened to blacklist us if we screened in Israel, because they thought it was not the right thing to do. And just also playing San Francisco pastor as well, and they said we have a whole campaign against you to make sure you don't screen there. So Shamim wrote a very wonderful letter to say why it's important to have dialogue and openness and not actually exclusion. That's not the point of creation and art and films and books. So it was a very interesting journey, and it was a very successful screening.
I feel like we never answered this young lady's point about the military. And first of all, thank you for your amazing comment, because we've been privileged, and it really is a privilege to hear something similar from people to say that it has meant so much to them, and it's something we never expected the film to do. But it's actually an honor, because you realise how important arts and stories are in teaching us how to be better human beings and to navigate this craziness of life that we have. It was always very important to me growing up to have those stories available. And I think part of writing I Can't Think Straight in the World Unseen was that those stories were not there. And I wrote the stories that I wanted to read and see. So thank you for that. And I do have two military trained characters in the Auschwitz Protocol. It's not my world, so it's not something but it's right because it's an action-based film. It was right for the characters to be that way, and it was really interesting for me to research more of that too. And one is lesbian and one is not specified, so hopefully we'll get more of those out there.
we know they're serving, so
yeah. Well, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what's really, it's so moving to hear testimony from fans, and I'm a fan as well, so I know what it means to stand up and talk to the filmmakers, yourself, and talk about how personal the connection to their work is and means and continues to be. How many of you have seen the film? And are we all going to go watch it together after this at 4 o'clock? Yes? Okay, good, because it's screening at 4 o'clock, right? Yeah, so I think that would be, let's all move in a pod. Yeah.
And just because most people don't know, that's actually our children at the very end of the movie.
Oh, really?
And, when Tyler and Layla are watching kids on the park bench, so that's Ethan and Ethan.
Beautiful. Yeah, even more meaningful.
Well, they don't look like that anymore. They're just 6 feet tall now.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness, yeah. Wow. We have time for one more question before we take a break and then make our way over to the theater to see a screening. One more. Anybody else? This is the time. If these are films that have just, meant something to you.
I just want to say, if you want to cast an Arab, right
We're
looking for an Arab.
Would you be comfortable doing love scenes?
Oh, no, I don't think I can.
I mean,
I don't know. I have to
we gotta be okay with the love scenes, okay? Come on now. We can
have your people call out people.
Send headshots and then no other kind of shots right now.
Yeah.
Can you speak up just a little bit louder? Questions about sex scenes.
It happened to me last week with Hanan. She's like, I'm just tired. Sorry, you meant in movies? Yeah, it happened a bit. To be honest, actually, can I tell the story? Okay, we had a German actress.
Very well done.
Very well, I'll tell you her name afterwards. Between you and me and Twitter. So she's massively well known on German TV, and we got.
What's her name again?
That's after.
And we got part of our funding from a German pre-sale based on her name. 10% of the budget went out from the producer. And there was two love scenes actually, despite the 40% at that time. And she got cold feet about a week before we were due to start shooting. Rebecca was already with me rehearsing, not love scene, just rehearsing. See how that can sound. And we were friends, we had a close relationship, we'd known her for 2 years. She had come and pitched herself for the movie. She's high profile in Germany, and I said, you sure, whatever. She's like, oh yes, I'm an actress. Anyway, she pulled as the thing. But she didn't pull, you're right. She said, I want the same nudity rider as Rebecca. And I said, that's perfect, because she doesn't have one. She just trusts me as a director. And then so they started to put all these conditions on their contract that would make it possible to distribute the film. So Hanan said, right, that's it. We're going to fire her. So I thought I was going to have to deal with these conditions, which were that she could tell me what to use, she could tell me which takes I could use, she would come behind the camera which is really awful, because then you create a culture where you're not in charge, the actors are own. And I thought I would have to swallow that deal because of the budget. But Hanan, to her credit, turned around and said, right, you're fired. And had to be recast, and we lost that pre-sale, so it was a real stress for her on the budget. She had to scramble around to find that money, but we made it happen. So yeah, shockingly, it happens all the time. But you just we end up with a love scene, and then I cut the love scene. But there you go. It just proves that we're being gratuitous.
Yeah, it didn't work.
It didn't work. Yeah,
Still
but,
off.
but yeah, I felt guilty about it.
All right. Anyone else have anything burning to say before we wrap up? Well, I want to thank the filmmakers for being here. I think it's so awesome to be able to connect with the fans, but also for the fans to be able to, have the opportunity to save your faces with these films, what these characters mean to them, and why the work matters so much. And so let's hear it for the filmmakers. You're here on the last day. Hang out. Don't sneak out too early. And let's go watch this film together. 4 o'clock, okay? All right. Thanks, everybody.